Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Learning Collective. I'm Ann Wynn, marketing specialist at Risk Inc. And this morning, we have a great session with Nick Floro, and I'm super excited about it and about learning a little bit more about this tool for design and instructional designing and development of content. And for those of you who are not familiar with Nick, he is the co-founder and learning architect at Sealworks Interactive Studios, and has over 28 years of experience in developing content. And as I mentioned, I'm super excited to have him here today to teach us a little bit more about Adobe XD and how to prototype with XD for your learning content. So good morning, Nick.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Hello,
Oh,
everyone.
absolutely. So we're excited to have you here, and like I said, this is a great. I'm really interested in learning more about the tool, and I think we've got some folks in the audience who will be, really interested in learning about the tool itself as well. And then, if you are watching this live with us, welcome. Thanks for being here. Good morning, Duncan. He mentioned, there we go, yes. So feel free to drop in your comments or any questions for Nick, and we'll entertain questions towards the end of his session. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up your screen and then get out of here so you can take it away. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll go over getting started prototyping with Adobe XD. This first part, I'm going to go through a couple slides just to kind of set the mood and get everyone on the same level ground. And then we'll actually go into Adobe XD and do some different demos. During this part, I can't see the comments, so hopefully everything will go smoothly. So first question that I always ask is, why should we prototype, or what's in it for me? And there's lots of different reasons, but some of the biggest reasons that we found over the 28 years that Ann had mentioned that we've been doing this stuff is that it will eventually save time because it allows you to focus on creating experiences and solutions. So the ideal is that we go into prototyping and using a tool like Adobe XD so that we can create and visualize different ideas. And that really helps us to test those ideals. So the ideal is that once you start to create these different models or creations, you'll actually start to test it with your user audience. So whether it's a stakeholder or whether it's management, hopefully you get to work directly with the audience. And the ideal is that you'll start to show them different examples. And as you start to explore options, this will help you to quickly iterate and get to that final result. And the big advantage here is that you can focus on what is actually needed. And before you start to do development, you can kind of figure out where everything goes, how the content looks, how you might use audio or video, or whether what you're envisioning is actually the right fit for your audience. So this lets you test that out, and it will lead to improved results. So in the old days, we used to call it paper prototyping, where we would do some sketching and we would cut out those different elements and we would paste them onto a board. And this is still a lot of fun. So when you first start getting into prototyping, you might want to get the scissors out and the crowns or the pencils and start to cut your objects into little shapes so that you can kind of play around with what happens if we put the little audio object over here, or the interactive element over there, or the navigation, or all the different elements, and you can start to play with how many items that you have on the screen. It's a lot of fun. The whole idea around prototyping is to think about how we can create experiences. So a lot of times when we're working with different teams, we'll start doing sketching. And I know Sarah was on, I think, 2 weeks ago or so, and she talked about some of the different tools, and she's big into sketching as well. And what I love about sketching is that the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And it's a great way to quickly take an idea and show it. You get some quick feedback on that, and then moving into a tool like Adobe XD, it allows you to do what we call low fidelity wireframes, which can be rough shapes and sizing, and then you can get into full visualizations where you can use actual graphics or finished graphics to build a full prototype, and it really helps you to evolve your concept. So what's great about Adobe XD is that it helps in that planning. You can use it in design and prototyping. And then the last area is in testing and feedback. And what that means is that you can actually go in, and as you start to show off concepts, or you start to play around with concepts and you're gathering that, you can actually share a link with your users or your audience where they can actually touch and interact with it, whether it's on an iPad or Android device, or whether it's on a desktop or laptop computer. What's great is that you also have the ability on the right-hand side to add comments if you enable that. So as a user, if you're asking me for feedback, I could be interacting with your XD, and then I can add some comments on the right-hand side. And as long as that team has Adobe accounts, you can actually see their name and their feedback that they're giving. When that's not possible, we may do screen grabs, and we'll talk about some of the other ways that we utilize that to gather feedback as well. So what's great about Adobe XD is it's free to get started. You can actually download it for Mac and Windows at no cost, and you can actually use it to start to play and experiment. And I strongly encourage everyone afterwards to go and download it, and allow yourself some time over the next week. Spend 30 minutes, spend an hour, and the more that you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with it. And we'll dive into some examples of how easy it is to design. But what's great is that you can quickly throw those different concepts around and look at different concepts without having to go crazy. So with Adobe XD, when you first launch it, you're going to get a screen that comes up, and the first thing you're going to do is figure out how you want to start, or what type of device you're actually going to be designing for. So if you're designing for a phone, you'll pick the phone, an iPad, a website or size, and then you can actually create a custom size. Or if you want, I usually start there and just kind of open it up. And you'll also see down at the bottom here any recent documents that you were working on. What's also really cool about Adobe products nowadays is that they are really big on providing tutorials and help. So it's really quick to get set up and get started. There's a huge community around Adobe XD, so there's lots of tutorials, lots of examples, and a lot of templates you can actually download and start to pull apart. And I'll show you a couple examples of that in a minute. So when you open up Adobe XD, what you have is you've got your big board in the front here, and you see I'm just kind of scrolling around, and along the left-hand side, you have several tools. You've got a box, a circle, a line, a pen tool, text tool, the Artboard tool, which allows you to create the boards that a user would actually interact with, as well as a search magnify tool. So what's cool is that you can click and move around anywhere on the screen. And then as you start to interact, you see here there are some grids. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm just kind of looking to get inspired or thinking about different ideals is to throw a bunch of concepts or screen grabs on the screen. And what's great about XD is it's so fast and so fluid that you can zoom in or out of your screen and kind of look at what you're envisioning, or what all the different elements that you're working with, and then you can start to experiment and pull things apart or reassemble them. What you notice here on the screen, there's these blue lines, which is a grid that you can actually set up as a default. So you have the ability to use standard ones, or you can create your own, and that just allows you to better align objects. And you can see some fashion stuff here. Along the left-hand side, you also have 3 different modes you can interact with. So in this mode, we're able to see all of our design elements. So you can actually save or bookmark colors, character styles, as well as symbols. Along the right-hand side, that panel allows you to go in, and as you select an object, it lets you do alignment, physical typing in of pixel sizes, or control the transparency, as well as a couple other controls as we select different types of shapes there. What's also really cool is that here you see an example of a template that we set up, and across the top we've got this really light blue box. We've got these 3 purple diamond shapes, and then we've got a red circle. And you notice on the left-hand side under our asset list, we have those colors, fonts that we're using, and what are now called components. So what's cool is that you can quickly go over to your Finder and drag and drop an image into a shape. So you're seeing I'm grabbing some, we're going to pretend to do an ice cream shop here, and we can grab some different elements, and we just drag and drop them, and it automatically takes the shape of the object that you're pulling it into. So it's really easy to start to experiment and play with these objects. One of the really powerful tools within XD is what we call the repeat grid. And so let's imagine we want to have several different examples of ice cream. I'm getting hungry for ice cream now. We can actually pull this object and use what's called the repeat grid up in the corner here. And what this allows you to do is we're going to go ahead and select that. Actually, we're going to add some text first up on top of the screen. So I can drag and drop that in, and you can copy and paste. We're going to grab a nav bar. And if I take that circle, we hit the repeat grid, and what'll happen is you get these 2 little green dots to the left and to the right and to the bottom. And if I touch that and drag out, you'll notice how that kind of expands. So as I pull that out, you'll notice that it automatically repeats that object over and over again. And if you move your cursor in between those circles, it allows you to adjust the space in between. If I grab those ice cream objects and drag it onto the first one, notice how it automatically pops it into each one of those circles, and it allows us to quickly build a prototype of an ice cream shop here, or a menu. But the idea was that you can quickly start to experiment and play. And as you start to work with these different tools, it allows you to focus on being creative, being inspired, and kind of fool around with all the different options rather than worrying about how do I use the tool or how do I create those different types of interactions. Um, What's also really cool is that you can, if you use the tools the right way, if you've saved character styles, you can actually go in and make it easier to update styles. So down here, we have some text, and if I save that as a character style, I can go in and adjust the shape as well as the color, and notice how it automatically applies across all the different areas. So if I go back, you see here it's really small, it's 24 point. As we go in and type in 40 and we adjust the color, notice it automatically applies across all of our artboards that we've set up. So we change the color to blue and it automatically applies across all of them. So it's just like in the good old days if you used PageMaker, QuarkXPress, InDesign. Today, you're able to use those, or even Word or Google Docs, you're able to set up styles which can be easily applied across your designs. And this saves a lot of time when a stakeholder says our colors have changed, or we need to tweak the size a little bit to make it easier for our audience to see, or we want to make it pop more. It allows you to apply those different effects without having to go crazy and manually update each one of those tiles. So here we see an example of a zoomed out view. And one of the really good things to do when you're using Adobe XD is to think about organization. And this will come organically to you as you start to play and experiment. You see lots of different boards that are on the screen. So you can see across the top here, we have really big font size. It's like 150 point, where we've labeled each area of this particular learning experience platform. And the idea was that we want to make it easier for the architects to come in, or the designers or the developers to be able to look and identify all the parts quickly. So if I'm looking for the reflection journal, I can see, oh, it's here, and then I can zoom into that area. What's cool is that if I go into the prototype mode, this allows you to start to add interactions. And one of the nice things about Adobe XD is that if you have a touchpad, I'm using a MacBook today, you can pinch and zoom on the trackpad, or if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel like this, you can actually use that scroll wheel to zoom in and out of the screen, and that makes it easier to interact. You can also use the keyboard, the option in the space, to select different tools and move around within them. So if I go into the prototype area, what this allows me to do is look at how we can start to add interactions. So if I select my first board where the user starts off, if I look at this particular button, you see this little blue line. This is showing where do you want that object to go when the user touches it or interacts with it. So by selecting it, a little pop-up comes up, and then I'm able to draw or expand the line to whatever screen I want. And you see some other lines here. The search panel goes to another screen. If I go from this page, it'll take me to the fourth area, the learning plan. If I click on this object, it goes down below to the learning paths. But what's cool is that you also have the ability to change some of the actions. So when I touch that button, I can choose a transition to try to mimic or simulate what happens on a phone device or what users are used to when you're interacting. It also makes it a little bit more real, and you can control the amount of time that it takes. You can play around with that to make it a little bit slower, a little bit faster. One of the big things that we use all the time is this option here called preserve scroll position. So a lot of times today, when you're navigating websites, you'll notice that the top nav bar is sticky. And what that means is that as you start to navigate down the page, it sticks to the top of your window so that you always have instant access to all those elements. So Adobe XD allows you to simulate that, or allows you to stick any objects to a specific spot. So as you navigate or scroll, those objects will maintain, and we'll do a quick walk through that in a second. So if we zoom in just to make that easier for you to see, and all these slides will be available in the resource link that we give you at the end. You can actually see how you can navigate. If I have numbered my boards correctly, I can quickly see the destination. So if I don't want to drag and drop those arrows, I can actually click on the pull down here and select a different one. So here we see an example. There's a preview mode in Adobe XD, which allows you to preview what it would look like in the browser. And here you see that example where the top nav bar is sticky. So that's always available. And as I navigate through each section, you notice that as I scroll up and down, that nav doesn't change. It's always there. So it always sets a guiding point for our user to be able to know where they are and how to navigate through the tool. So here you see that example again is when I click on this button, how it triggers behind the scenes, what happens, and the transition that takes place in between. So let's jump out and we'll look at some of the different tools in Adobe XD and we'll start to experiment. So if I come into Adobe XD, this is that startup screen. You see an example in the background. We're going to go ahead and create a custom size or blank slate. So here's our blank board. And what I'm going to do is just start to add a couple of shapes here. So I'm just going to grab a box and click and drag it onto the screen. You notice that it automatically adds it to my canvas. And on the right-hand side, I mentioned that how all those different variables are available. So if I go in and change the color, we'll just make it a big, bright red box. And you notice if I zoom out, I can get really small or really big. So if I just start to hold the Option key down and drag a couple of objects, notice how we can get really small and we can kind of see the whole board that's available, or we can zoom way in. So it makes it really easy for you to kind of see the big picture and then kind of zoom in and focus on a different area. So one of the first things I mentioned you're going to do is if you select the artboard, I can actually just click and drag and start to create a screen that a user would interact with. But you'll also notice along the right-hand side, there are preset templates which have pixel sizes already built in. So if I want to look for the average iPad size, it's 1024 by 1366. I see Android, I see Surface devices. I'm going to go with a standard web 1280 window. And you can go in and click a couple times there. So I have a couple different screens. I'm going to go ahead and look at this first one, look at the second one, and just see which one's right. This first one is 1280 by 800. So if I zoom in, you'll notice that above the artboard, I can go ahead and label that. So let's go ahead and say, this is 000, this is our play area, our first screen. And the more descriptive I can get here, the easier it'll be to kind of figure out where we're going and what we're doing. So we use numbering, and I usually skip every 5 digits or 10 digits so that when we have to insert something, we can actually sort our boards. So when I click enter, notice how that places here. And what's cool is that if I Option Shift drag it, it'll automatically create a second one over to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this 005, and I can drag those orders in whatever way I want, and I can also use a plugin to automatically sort them. What's also cool at the top of the screen, if I'm looking for screen 5 and I've got 100 screens, I can start to type it in and it automatically pulls it up. So you can see it's kind of like a mini database that's built in to allow you to quickly find your content. So let's grab some shapes. And what's really cool is that I'm going to go ahead and grab a browser window over here, and I'm just going to go over to apple.com as an example. And let's say we were creating a site where we want to use this graphic here. I'm just going to do a quick screen grab of these shapes. And what's cool is I can just grab that shape and drag it onto my screen, and I can resize that. So I'm going to go ahead and put it over here. If I grab the text tool, I can click and drag and I can type in, this is some text. Often when we first start out a project or a design, we don't really know exactly what we have. We might have an older course, we might have some new, Word documents or something that we're starting to play with, but often we have to kind of start to design or start to plan or start to play with concepts before we have all the materials. So that's one of the reasons why I love using Adobe XD, because it helps us start to figure out and communicate what could or could not work as we start to plan. So what's cool is that you notice this text box I have here. There are 2 different ways to use text boxes. One is an open area, and one is what they call area text, which is usually what I use. And what's cool is that if I know I'm going to have about this much text, about a quarter of the screen or an eighth of the screen, I can go into the plugins menu, and one of the plugins I use is called Lorem Ipsum. So if I say quick Lorem Ipsum, it'll automatically, just got to accept this, it'll automatically pop in text that fills that box. And what's nice about that is, let's imagine we're going to have a headline at the top. Headline, I can spell what I want my user to do. So I'm going to go over here to the font sizes, and let's say it's 40 point, and we're going to drag that across the top to make it big. Go ahead and make it a little bit bigger in size, and maybe we'll make it black so it really pops on our screen. You'll notice that when you start to play with colors on the right-hand side, you can start to hit the plus key and it'll start to allow you to add these little blocks for quick reference. If you know the hexadecimal number or if the branding group gave you those numbers, you can quickly add those in. And what's nice is that as you start to work with this, if I right-click on an object, I can add the color to the assets. So if I come over here and click on the left lower box, the top element, you can notice the colors that we've added. So if I change that to the red that I selected, I can add that color. And you notice that we have that quickly available now to touch and navigate and switch our objects around. If I really like this type style, I'm noticing that the text is a little bit close together. I'm going to zoom in just so you guys can see that easier. And one of the things that we like to do to make it easier to read is add some leading in between the lines. So if I go in, I usually do like 6 to 8 points. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 28 leading. So you notice that it gives it a little bit of breathing room between the sentences and makes it easier to read. So if I really like that and if I want to use that as my default style, I can go over here and say add character styles and it'll automatically capture. That's Helvetica. It's that grayish color. It's 20 point with 28 point leading. So what's cool is that I can option drag that. And let's say we wanted to create 2 text boxes. Maybe this first one is going across the top. Then we want to have a big visual, and then we want to have some text over here. And then we can look for a button to allow users to click or navigate to that next area. So if I want to grab a rectangle here, just start to draw a shape. What's cool is that if I come into the corner, I can start to add a curve to the shape. So you can see you can make that super rectangular, or you can round it off, and you can even go in and type in the radius of that corner so that if you want to be really precise, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to be lazy and I'm just going to grab this text and just say, let's play. And I'm going to make that smaller. And if I select that button, I don't know, I'm feeling orangey today. I've got a fill and a border shape. And I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste that to make it go on top. And I'm going to make this color white so that it inverts out. So what's nice is that I have these 2 objects, and I'm going to just group that together so it's connected and I can easily move it. So like that's our first screen. On our second screen, let's say we want to have a little bit more information here and we don't have imagery yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and add 3 boxes that are going to represent the 3 shapes. And if I option drag that, so I'm just holding the Shift and Option key on my keyboard. You can't see that, but you'll notice that as I start to space things, notice how it automatically gives me the space between the 2 shapes. So I can make sure to the left and to the right, that's equal distant. And I'm really close there by 1 pixel. So that's good enough for me for playing. I'm going to go ahead and resize this shape a little bit just to make the text kind of fit in that same box. Notice that when I start to drag the text, how it automatically snaps to the left there. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller and adjust the leading a little bit just for that smaller size. So we're going to go 1824. And what's nice is that I can quickly shift, option click and drag and make that 3 boxes. So what's nice is that, let's say the stakeholder comes back to us tomorrow or the audience gives us some feedback, they don't really understand what's going to happen in that shape. We can go get some imagery for these shapes to kind of simulate or act as our objects that our user is going to be touching. So if I don't have that yet, I can use color. So maybe we'll go with a nice greenish color. And what's nice is that if I want to apply that style, I can hit Command C on my keyboard, copy it. And if I go under Edit, I notice that there's a Paste Appearance command. And I've got a keyboard shortcut for that. So if I hit that, that allows me to apply that same style without having to go and click and choose the color again and so on. So for whatever reason, if I make this 20 point and we want to change the font, we can go in here and change the font style. Go with Humanist. It's got a little more curvature. I'm going to copy that style and I'm just going to hit my keyboard shortcut. Oops. Option V is my shortcut for that. And you notice how it automatically applies that. And of course I can undo and go back to what it was, but that gives you flexibility in experimenting and so on. So on my desktop, if I bring up a window, I've got a couple different graphics here of Nerf guns. I've got 2 kids, 2 boys, and they love Nerf guns. So if I drag one of these objects, you'll notice that if I drag it into the shape, notice how it highlights. that allows me to drop that object into that shape. So that makes it easier for you to go in and start to quickly apply that. So if I go back to my Finder, I can grab another shape. Let's say we want to grab the little pistol and grab a third one. Oops, I missed. So that lets you go in and play. So if what happens a lot of times is we're working with a team, a focus group, a stakeholder, we'll start to grab elements from an existing site or a learning object, and we'll start to pull those in by copying and pasting and experimenting there. What's also really cool is that you have the ability to grab those objects or save them as what are called components. And so if you want to reuse that in a different project or create a design guide or style guide, that allows you to reuse those objects across multiple projects. So if you always want to use this font size, that style, that color, or this shape for all of your graphics within a project, it allows you to make it nice and simple to be able to apply across multiple areas. So I'm going to go ahead and just really quickly show you how you can do a prototype. So the idea was that if I zoom in here, I'm going to click on the Let's Play. I'm going to go to the prototype area. And before I do this, I want to save the project. So I'm just going to call it the Learning Collective and hit save. And what happens that when I go to the prototype mode, notice how that little object has that shape connected to it. So if I click and drag, I can drag it over here to the right. So when I touch that button, I want it to go to my second screen, and that allows you to create that quick interaction. So what's cool is that if I want to just preview that, I can hit the play button. I see my first screen. If I move my cursor, or if I had a touch screen, I move it over Let's Play, and notice how the cursor changes to indicate it's a hotspot. So if I click, it gives you that nice pretty dissolve, and I'm able now to interact. Just to show you really quick, if I want to demonstrate like scrolling of a page, if I click on that artboard, I go back to design mode. I'm just going to grab that bottom point and make the page longer. And if I just grab those three objects just by clicking on white space and then dragging across, using my head to simulate that, I can quickly create more content there and just save it. I'm going to go back to hit play. And you'll notice now when I hit Let's Play, I've got a scrolling box, so I can see what it's going to look like if I have a lot of products that we're teaching our users about, or we're looking at all the different things that we want to experiment with or play with. And you can kind of simulate, wow, that's a lot of information. How will users scroll through that? Or is it too much data to scroll through? If I click on that, I might dive in or watch a little video about it, or maybe see an AR or a 3D model of that shape. I don't have that today, but let's pretend we did. Okay, so this is normally what I ask questions, and I see a couple people have chatted. Good morning, Dawn. Hello. And I see Duncan's here as well. So let's do a couple other things here. And I'm going to open up this other example in XD. This was a simulation that we were building or starting to think about building. And one of the first things that we did, we were talking on Twitter last night about using a program called MindNode. And MindNode allows you to create flow maps of what you're thinking or what's happening. So in this particular simulation, they had about a week to design and develop this concept. And so we had to quickly show the development team like how the flow of data would work. So the idea was that when a user first comes into this simulation, they get a little onboarding video, and then they have three choices that they can make a decision of what happens. So if they hit A or C, that allows them to go down to question 2. If they hit B, that will go over into the feedback loop, and depending on where you are, that may allow you to jump back into the flow of questions. But you can see things can get pretty complicated. So the idea here was to be able to see what was happening, capture that, and you'll notice that we use that numbering scheme to help us understand how we're going to navigate. So if I zoom out by scrolling outwards, we can see down below we have each of the choices, and each choice has several options that go with it. And the idea was that we wanted to make it easier for the stakeholder to give us feedback, but also to make sure that we could test the concept before we started coding and kind of see how that would work. So we see there would be a video here. There's also a text version there. If a person can't hear, we wanted to make sure that they could actually read or understand what the question was, or we didn't have a headset. We wanted to be able to support accessibility. Once that question is there, the idea was that you would get 3 options, and there's a voiceover, but there's also on-screen text to help show that. So again, if you don't have the ability to hear or headset, you'd be able to see that. So based on what you select, that would take you over to one of these choices. So we've got the wrong answer, the best answer, and then a middle response, which was okay, not the best choice. But the idea was, depending on what you do, if I connected to the wrong answer, that would immediately kick you out and you got a feedback screen. So this is all done in Adobe XD, and you can see, just like we were doing in our quick example, each of these objects are selectable. So if for whatever reason we had less copy here, I can delete that and we can play around with font size or style to kind of see what would happen. Or if we went to experiment and see what would happen if we move the copy to the right and the graphic to the left, it's a little bit too busy. So we'll go back to the way we had it. But this allows you to start to experiment and see the different possibilities, which is really cool. I mentioned earlier also how when you go to the prototype mode, you can create what's that choice of scrolling a fixed position. So what that does is, if I were to say, let's go ahead and preview this screen here, when I navigate, see how that nav is stuck, and you'll notice that I don't have a white box. So when I scroll up, the text is on top of, or it might be just behind everything else. So we can go ahead and choose to fix that. What's also, just really quick, I wanted to show you, if I don't have that on, if I preview that, notice how it just goes off the screen. So that's the advantage of using that sticky nav at the top. So let's scroll out, scroll back in, and I'm going to go ahead to our third example just to show you one other thing. So this is a prototype for that Nerf guns we're fooling around with the kids. And the idea here is that if I go into the menu, the product area, we notice that we have that main nav. This might be used by the sales team to learn more about the products. We have a little description. We have one of the 2D versions of the product, and we might highlight different areas. So as the user moves their cursor or touches different areas, it might talk about brand, speed, design. And if I hit play, it would play a little video about it. But we have 3 different boxes, some different graphics here. And the idea is that we can learn more about design, focus, or marketing, and we can learn about what's next. You can subscribe to get more information if you want to continue learning after you go through the initial content. One of the things that Adobe XD doesn't do completely is automatically build like the responsive versions. So you, a lot of times will design, you have the ability to say responsive resize. So if I change the window size, it will move elements around. But we found that it's a lot easier to focus and share with the different design and development teams our vision of what's possible. So we'll actually create a smaller view of objects, and we want finer control. So we'll move objects around and adjust them to meet our needs of what we are thinking or what we are planning. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and go down here, and let's imagine we were building out this screen, and this is an example of a component. So we saw earlier, if I want to go in and let's say we want to experiment with the title sizes, you notice here it says concept development. If I grab that character style, it's Lucida Bright 45 point. So what's cool is that if I go ahead and edit that, you saw earlier, if I change the color, notice how it automatically applies that, and it applies across all the different areas. So if I make the point size really small, it gets small across all 3 designs. If I make it bigger, it gets bigger. So you can play an experiment. You can see how simple it is to apply styles across all your different artboards that you've created. So what I want to do is working with a component. A component is an object that you want to reuse over and over again. So a lot of times your header would be a component, your footer would be a component, and you can drag and drop those objects. So if I go ahead and select this lower area, you can kind of see what I'm playing with there. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to make sure I grab it all. And if I group that, I have it as one shape now. So if I add that as a component, say make component, that will come over here. I can go over here and say that's our footer. And if I want to reapply that or make a change, I can quickly drag it back onto my board and then snap it into position. So that makes it easy for me. If I make it in a component, if I want to change that color, it will automatically apply across all the different versions. And then you can update the component so that it'll apply across all the boards that you've created. So the same idea we did with the font, you can apply it globally there. So with the product map, the ideal is that I want to grab this shape, and I'm going to go ahead and place it. And you saw in our opening slides how we did step and repeat grid. So if I say repeat grid, the ideal is that it adds those 2 little colors, and I can go ahead and drag them out. And what's cool is that because it acts as a grouped object, I can adjust the space in between. Or if I had a bigger screen or wider screen, I can adjust it and you can see how it kind of controls that. So I want it to kind of fit inside this area. And I want to also snap it downwards. So we have two rows by 3 across, and I can adjust the space there so it fits nicely. And what's cool is that I can do the same thing. Let's say we want to make a circular shape inside for those graphics. We want to add some photos to simulate what will happen when a user dives deeper. We're going to use that repeat grid again and go ahead and make 3 across, adjust the space, and then we're going to go down and adjust the space. And so what's cool is if I go back to my Finder on the Mac, if I grab 6 objects, I just drag it into the first shape, it automatically applies across all. Now you'll notice that we're only seeing part of the element here, and that's automatically sizing based on the object size. So if I double click on that particular shape, I can hold the Shift key down and adjust it so I can see the full size of that object. So I can make it smaller or wider or whatever way I want to optimize that. So if I zoom in, I can see that nicely. And we can go in and adjust that for each object. So ideally, we would have picked a shape or size that would have fit better, but you can see how quickly it is to simulate or show an example of what's possible to your audience. And again, if I go up to the top here and hit the preview button, that allows you to, again, simulate and show what it looks like, and we can kind of scroll through and see all our shapes and objects in there. And that makes it, again, easy to showcase and demonstrate and kind of get quick feedback. And you're like, okay, we like the ideal of using these illustrations. Maybe they want more diversity, or maybe they want to use actual pictures of people that might be in there. And there's good reasons to use either way. But we can quickly grab that and show that as a secondary example, which again, just gives you that freedom to play and experiment and see what clicks for your users. Okay, so we're going to jump back, and I'm going to show you a couple other things here. So what I was trying to illustrate here is that the ideal with Adobe XD is that it allows you to quickly design variations of your concepts or experiment, and whether it's colors, font styles, shapes of objects, different treatments, it allows you to prototype multiple versions that you can then test and gather feedback. So this is an example of a project we got to work on with a publishing company where they gave us a bunch of different content for different authors. So there was, it's for literature, and they gave us a lot of Word files, PowerPoint files, video files. And the idea was that we were able to take all that content. There were 29 authors, 20 documents each, about 500 pages of information. And they allowed us to experiment and play around and think about the different possibilities. So when we got into that sketching and prototyping mode, this is that ideal of a low fidelity, where we're just starting to figure out, here are all the different things that we want to do, here are all the authors' names, here are some of the ways that we want to be able to sort or interact with that content. So by creating this lo-fi wireframe, we can start to visualize, here's all the data that we have to work with. How do we make it easier for a audience member or learner to be able to interact with that content? So you can see it gets a little bit nicer as we start to play with some of the shapes and organizing the data, and then we start to play with some of the content. So we know we had some photos, some text. So again, these are all lo-fis, and often a stakeholder will ask you, is that what it's going to look like, or is that what's going to happen? And then as we start to do that design, one of the really cool things that popped out as we were learning about the different authors, the designer wanted to use font styles for each of the different pieces. So here you see an example with Sylvia Plath or Edgar Allan Poe. They wrote a little bit darker. So we wanted to use that horror type style that you might see or read or think about when you're reading it. So this helps you visualize their type of work. What was cool is that as you start to interact with that content, we were able to rebuild this in XD as we start to experiment, but we want to experiment with the ideal of using fiction versus poetry versus drama. And there's a whole ecosystem of products that work with Adobe XD, from plugins to additional tools that you can use to do bigger animation styles. So you can start to test and experiment and demonstrate the different possibilities there. as you clicked on a author, you were able to see information about them. So there was text, there was audio, and there were some videos. So you were able to navigate through that. And this is one of my favorite pieces, but using a tool like XD today, we're able to, again, visualize and think about how we can work with it. So I've got a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old now, and one of the things I grew up with, this was the ideal of refrigerator magnets. And when they're learning their ABCs, we have those letters on our dishwasher, and you can kind of experiment and play, and we make different words. But we want to apply that concept to a interactive experience. So here, the ideal was that users could play with the magnets and, oops, clicking too many times there, and see what it would be like to create a piece of poetry. So here you see an example where I'm dragging and dropping the magnet, and you're going to see I'm not going to do too good of a job, but how would, at the bottom, we can select Shakespeare, use Dickinson or Bradstreet, how would they use it? And the ideal of the experience was to get you to experiment, get you to play, but you'll notice that when it describes how Shakespeare uses it, I'm able to touch or click on each one of these hotspots. So Shakespeare, iambic pentameter, and it would allow me to dive in or explore further that ideal or concept. So we're pulling, in this case, college students into the content and allowing them to learn through interaction or play, which is fun. So I mentioned earlier, Adobe XD has a huge library of resources, tutorials, and templates. So when you launch XD, in that window, there's a quick link to the tutorials. And this is just something you need to set up time. In a perfect world, you would set up like 30 minutes at least once a week and just kind of explore the different possibilities. Having a great community like this where we can, tweet or chat or look at all these different resources is also really cool. One of the other things that they do is that they offer under the menu, you're able to select UIKit under File, and you're able to dive in. So you can download Apple's latest design treatment, Microsoft's, as well as Google. And this allows you to quickly simulate, if you're building an interactive app for a phone or a tablet, you can grab those elements so that you can better simulate what the user will do without having to recreate them all by yourself. So you just go under File, select Get UI, and you can select iOS, Google, Microsoft. You also can go to wireframes or UI kits where you can see a huge library of examples, which is great. So here's the Windows kit, and again, you're seeing that zoomed out view. You can select an object, hit a keyboard shortcut and zoom in, or you can use the scroll wheel, where the touchpad is pinch and zoom, which I love. Here we see they actually have an AlexaKit, so you can actually simulate voice objects and what will happen when you're interacting. There's an iOS kit, and they have the latest version as well. There should be a new version of iOS coming out in the fall, and I think Apple's conference is next month, so we'll learn more about that as well. There's lots of different tutorials. I was showing this example earlier. This one's more of a fashion editorial, but what I love doing as a learning architect is looking outside of our normal space. So I don't usually get to work in fashion, but it's fun to see what they're doing, the different types of font treatments, how they're cropping or working with different photos, and I'll use that to inspire myself to play and push the boundaries of what we normally get to do in our content and experiment, see what works, what resonates with our users. With XD, there's a built-in plugin library. So when you launch, you can select add-ons. You can also do it under the plugins menu. So if you go under plugins, you can say discover or manage plugins, and you can see I have about a dozen different plugins that I used. We demonstrated Lorem Ipsum today. I mentioned how you can sort objects. That's through the Artboard Plus. But this allows you to go in, and what's cool is that there are about 100 plugins, and they allow you to do all kinds of things from quickly grabbing shapes or styles and starting to interact with them. My favorite plugins, first one is Web Export, which allows you to take your designs and actually enable you to export as HTML. So that's great for a quick prototype that you might take a little bit further or experiment what it would look like or how it would work. Artboard Plus allows you to go in, that's a must-have. That lets you sort the order of your boards very quickly. So if you number them, or use some type of label tagging, allows you to sort them so you can quickly export in the order that you want and work with it. Lorem Ipsum allows you to quickly apply a bunch of text to a block. So that is when you're waiting for your content from your stakeholder, you can kind of fool around and see what a headline versus a block of text looks like. And a lot of times when a stakeholder can see what 2 blocks of text look like on that screen or how much scrolling there might be, that might influence their writing or the amount of data that they work with, rather than just dumping it on you. So that allows you to be proactive and kind of get after them. Image Optimizer is also a great plugin. It allows you to optimize. So if you just, you saw when I drag and dropped an image from the Apple site, that graphic would be pretty big, a couple of megs, because I just grabbed it from the screen grab utility. So using Image Optimizer, it'll automatically make it into a size that is more respectable. So when I export a PDF or provide a web link, a user on a phone or not as good bandwidth would be able to interact with it a lot faster. One of the coolest plugins that Adobe made, these plugins are all free, which is awesome. A lot of them will also allow you to connect to additional tools. Adobe created one in the last couple of months called Whiteboard. And what this allows you to do is quickly collaborate or have a standard way of creating interactions. So they have one for command boards. They have one for like doing a quick design thinking brainstorm. What's cool is that you also have the ability to take a design and you can quickly highlight the draw tool, and it actually allows you to use, if you're using like a tablet or a pencil connected to your computer or a Wacom tablet or a trackpad, you can draw on it, and it's a great way, instead of going like to Snagit or another tool, it allows you to all do it within the tool. So if a stakeholder is giving you feedback, you can quickly highlight they like this idea, they didn't like this as much, or we need to work this into the main concept. So it allows you to play and experiment. One of the things I didn't show you is that within XD, if you are subscribed to the Creative Cloud, you can take advantage of their collaborative mode. And what that means is that if I was working with 2 or 3 people, if we all have Adobe accounts, we can all be working in the same XD file at the same time remotely. And it works pretty well. It's still in beta, but the advantage of that is that if I'm working on the dashboard, you're working on the interior screen, or vice versa, we're able to do that at the same time without working separately and then recombine it. So that kind of shows you what's possible there. I'm going to go ahead. So a couple of resources or tools to check out and start to experiment with as you're playing. One of my favorite tools to check out outside of Adobe XD when we are getting to travel again and working, or if you're working in your bedroom and need to go downstairs to the kitchen, there's an app called Office Lens, which works on your iPhone or your Android device. And what it allows you to do basically is take a picture of, in this case, a document, and that's a printout on top of the table. When it snaps the picture, it will automatically upload it to the cloud and use AI to automatically straighten out that image so it looks amazing. Here's an example of a board. You can see one behind me. If I'm on an angle, or if we're at a conference, we take a picture of the screen, it will automatically straighten it. And what this does is it makes it easier for you to capture information and share it with your team. So we use this all the time. It's free, which is great, and allows us to interact. So here's an example of me playing around with my business card. You see there's 3 on the desk. I'm going to go ahead. You'll notice that it has a style called business card. So we'll automatically recognize the size and shape. When I click the button, it will automatically straighten it out. So it makes it really easy. Once I have it, I can save it to my photo library on my phone or my tablet, and then I can also email it or tweet it or do whatever else I want with it. The other tool that I use all the time is Zoom. You can also use tools like WebEx and Join Me and all the other ones that are out there. I personally love Zoom because it allows you, the quality of the video is really high. You can see some of my team. And what I love about Zoom is that we can have video and in whatever we're working on the screen at the same time, which most tools do. But where the magic happens for me with Zoom is that their mobile apps work really well. So I use a tablet a lot of times to start to annotate or work with content. So if I have, you're showing me an example of what you're working on in Adobe XD, I can actually annotate on top of your screen using a tool like this. So everyone's working remote today, and I hope everyone's doing well. We are able to quickly do that using a tool like this. We also use Slack. WebEx has it, but it's not as fluid or not as optimized when you're working with lots of different devices. We found more challenges using those other tools. That's our favorite combination. The other thing that I love doing just as a learning architect to share is using an iPad. There's a markup mode. So you can actually take your pencil, if you drag from the lower left corner up into the center of the screen, it'll automatically grab whatever on your screen, and then you can start to annotate it. So it's like having the power of Snagit anywhere and using it interactively. So a lot of times I'll load up a course that I'm working on, or a learning screen, or a platform, or an app, and I can start to draw on it, and that helps me to quickly communicate to my team or a stakeholder what we're thinking or how we're going to envision it. And it's got a highlighter or a pencil tool. You can use different colors and so on, and then you can tweet it, you can save it, you can transfer it back to your computer. One of the other magic tools that we've been tweeting about over the last couple weeks is a tool that we discovered last year called Miro. And this is a great tool when you're working remote. It's miro.com. And what's amazing about it is that you can sign up for free, which is always great, especially when you're fooling around or starting to experiment. And it's great for collaborating with remote teams. So my team's been remote for a little over 10 years now, which is great. But what's cool is that when we want to brainstorm or think about it, we started using Miro to be able to do this quickly. And what's great is that everyone can kind of jump into the product. You can use one of their templates. So here's an example of a mind map. It has built-in audio and video streaming, but notice that you see each person's cursor moving, so we can actually see what everyone's working on. Everyone took a different branch of the content, and as we pan out or zoom out, you're able to work with all this different data. So you can create a brainstorming board, a timeline, some different imagery, a mood board potentially, what you have to do this week. And what's really great is that I can be working on it. If Rich, one of our other engineers, comes in, he's able to look at it and see all the changes I made. They automatically highlight in pink or like a purpley pink color. And if I want to quickly jump in or work with him, or Molly as an example, we're able to jump into audio or video, or we can launch Zoom, whatever we want to do, but we're able to see what the other person's doing all at the same time. So it's like we're working in the same room remotely in this virtual board. So highly recommend checking that out and experimenting and seeing how that might fit into what you're doing. We've got two web resources. One's called mobileappsforlearning.com, which allows you to learn about all different types of mobile apps and how you can use them to create, to brainstorm, and to sketch different ideas. And the other one we created based on this session is prototypingforlearning.com. So it just quickly gives you links to all the different tools and some of the different things that we do that you can apply when you're getting started. So check those out. One other great tool that I love is this website called Sidebar.io. So I'll go here at least once a week, if not every other day as time allows. And this allows you to go in and learn about the latest in design from around the world. So if you sign up for their newsletter, they'll automatically email you every day the 5 latest stories that they've curated to make it easier for you to get inspired and to learn about what different people are doing inside of the design world. Also, what the Learning Collective Ann and team have done here, Duncan, is they've created this great resource where, because of everyone stuck at home currently, you're able to learn and continue to grow and think about all the different tools. So I saw Kristen speak last week, and JD, I think it was the week before, and Sarah was also in that day. But there's a whole library of videos that you can go back and watch if you didn't get to see it live, and check out their resources and links, and just kind of a way to keep growing. You can download XD at this link, which is you go to adobe.com and just say XD, you'll find it. But again, it's free. If you don't have the Creative Suite, you can download it on Mac or Windows, play and experiment. Hopefully you saw how you can start to connect the dots and work with it as well. So I'm going to jump out of presentation mode and see if there are any questions. No, kind of went quick. Hopefully everyone learned, and I'm going to bring it back over to Ann.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I was trying to tweet some of the stuff and like pay attention to your information at the same time. I did have one question. So once you prototype and you get everything approved with the stakeholders and whatnot, what steps do you go beyond that to create the content then? I mean, and by the way, I love all the tools. Yeah. And you sharing the tools, right? I was like, I have FOMO for all these tools now.
Great question. So what we typically do is there's actually, I didn't show you, when you're in Adobe XD in the share mode, there is 3 different ways that you can share the content. There's a development mode, which is amazing because what that allows you to do is it will take each board and build a little template for the developers. So they get that link and they're able to see the font size, the colors, and the shapes of all the different objects. Using that one plugin, which I believe was called Web Export. I'm just going to go ahead and click this link to show you an example. You're able to export HTML. We found that the quality isn't that great. It's okay, but it's good for a quick spec or playing. So here's spec mode. Here we go. So if I zoom out, I'm on a big screen today. And so when I exported it this way, it shows you the size of the design. It shows you all the colors that are used, the styles. So this gives them a quick guide they can use. And you'd want to clean this up. You can see I've got a lot of different point sizes in there. But it gives them a starting point. We'll also have a PDF. We've actually been experimenting with taking this now and moving it into Miro so that we can interact, so that they can highlight an object. And honestly, in 28 years, this is something we're always playing with and tweaking based on feedback, even internally with the team.
Sure.
So there's no perfect way of doing it, but the ideal is to keep things flowing.
Absolutely, and I think this is a great. I mean, your presentation and all the tools and tips you gave it was great for someone who doesn't have an instructional design background like me. I was like, oh, this is really easy to follow along, even, and to be able to see it so quickly help you to create, develop, and edit as you go along. Because yeah, you're right. You don't want to go back to your slides and revise 5 different things and then come back to the stakeholder and then come back and forth. So I think this is a really efficient way to design and get your project out there done in a very productive and efficient way.
Yeah, what's great is that once you get comfortable with the tools and experimenting, is that as the stakeholder says, can we do this, can we do that, you can do it real time. And that always amazes them. But it's so cool to see the smile on their face if we got video on, and to be able to show them, and they're like, can you make it work that fast? And we're like, no, it takes a little bit longer for the developer team to do their thing. But the other thing that we've learned is that to change something in development, usually it's much longer, much harder, costs more money. Yeah. So this allows for that flow. And what's cool is that we were talking prior that you're a marketing specialist, that anyone can really take advantage of the tool and you can use it in marketing as well. But the developers will go in and experiment or play. The design team can do their thing, and it allows for that to be more organic and flow faster.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I was thinking of as you were going through. I was like, oh, this would be great for collateral and then for mobile app design and things like that as well. So thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful today. And I think Duncan made a comment here too. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So, but again, thank you for your time, Nick. This was definitely very informative, and I'm definitely going back through the video myself to watch everything again. I will share the links of the different tools that you had talked about during the presentation. And I know that you've got some resources that you want to share as well. We'll get those links up as soon as we get them from you. And if you are watching the replay of this, please feel free to continue to put your comments and questions into the comments, and we'll make sure that Nick gets it if there are any further questions after this. So thank you again, Nick, so much for today.
Thanks. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.
Bye.